Alrighty, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and inshallah we will start right now. So just to go ahead and get started, like I said, this is our first offering of the professional development workshop for the MSA Lone Star Council, which for those of y'all who may not be familiar with it, the MSA Lone Star Council is an umbrella organization that connects collegiate MSAs all across Texas. And so Project Alum is something that I'll be discussing in a little bit, but essentially this is our first workshop in, inshallah, a series of workshops that we're hoping to have for both alumni, young professionals, and even undergrads who are interested in these kind of things. And just to talk a little bit about LSC's latest initiative, which is Project Alum. So Project Alum is more than just a witty acronym. Alum would stand for Alumni Leading the Ummah's Munchkins. And essentially what we are trying to do is to connect yesterday's generation of Texas MSAers with today's by cultivating a lifelong community focused on service, growth, and opportunities. So essentially for a lot of folks who have already graduated, once you kind of leave undergrad or even grad school, you're no longer part of your MSA. And there's this kind of like weird void between, not being an MSA and not being able to attend MSA events, but then also like not being old enough to become like a masjid uncle or auntie. So you're just kind of like stuck as in like, where's my space? Where can I go to find this like young professional community? So inshallah, Project Alum is working to fill in that gap and provide a lot of different opportunities in different ways and facets. We're hoping to have networking, mentorship, spiritual and professional growth, along with different ways, of course, for alumni to give back directly to MSA communities. Of course, this is something that, as an alum, you can choose what kind of capacity you'd like to be involved with. So if you want to be super hands-on, if you want to mentor like 15 different undergrads, you're totally welcome to do that. And inshallah, that's something that we'll be working towards. But if you're like, hey, I just want to have a game night every once in a while with a couple of other young professionals, inshallah, that's also something that we're hoping that Project Alum can kind of fulfill. So if you're interested, and even if you're not 100% committed to joining something like this, I did include a link right now on screen, so please feel free to join. It's just an interest form, so if you're like, I don't know what I can do or what I can offer, that's totally cool. This is a space that is created by and for MSA alum, so feel free to just kind of tune in. Inshallah, we'll be having a lot of different upcoming events, discussions, networking, and mentorship opportunities coming very soon. And just a couple of events that don't necessarily have to do with Project Alum, but just kind of want to plug in regards to what the MSA Lone Star Council is doing. So we do have a film festival coming up next weekend on Saturday, as well as a virtual MSA showdown the weekend after. Both of those links can be found on screen. And you can also go to our website, which is msa-texas.org for more information. And then one of our partners and good friends, Faith ATX, which is kind of a young professional space in Austin, Texas, is hosting a halal investing session with Sharia portfolio on Wednesday, March 31st. So if that's something in your wheelhouse, or if you're interested in that, feel free to check it out. I've personally attended a couple of Faith ATX's like virtual events, and they're really awesome and very relaxed. So feel free to join if that's something that you're interested in. But without further ado, we'll just go ahead and get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. Again, for the attendees, feel free to, if there's a question that you have, we would prefer if you would just use the chat feature to drop a question, or if you have a comment or suggestion, feel free to participate and engage in that way as much as possible. And inshallah, if there's a question that you would like to ask, I guess with your camera and your mic on, inshallah, we can go ahead and save that towards the end. But does anyone have any questions? If not, then we'll just go ahead and get started. Okay, awesome. So just to kind of start off with, we're going to play, well, not play. I'll just go ahead and pick one of the panelists, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So alhamdulillah, we got a lot of different questions that people have and are really interested in, mashallah, learning about the diversity of fields that are presented here today. So we'll just go ahead and start off with Saad, Yousuf. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your educational background, history, and what kind of steps that you've taken to become where you're at today in regards to your career.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, everybody. Yeah, so I'm a sports journalist. My name is Saad. I graduated from UNT undergrad in 2017. I'm still actually at UNT in grad school to get my teaching degree for a whole separate thing. But right now I'm a sports journalist. I worked at the Dallas Morning News for 2 years. I worked at ESPN for 5.5 years at the radio station here in Dallas. And then now I'm full-time writer at The Athletic, covering the Dallas Stars after I covered the Mavericks and Cowboys, as well as a general assignment writer for The Athletic. And I'm also a producer and show host at 96.7 FM, The Ticket. And so, yeah, it's sports journalism is kind of like, it's a very unique, I guess, field and industry. I think for a lot of careers, school is a pretty high on the emphasis and like on the priority scale and things like that. Not so much for sports journalism. I'm not trying to like, discount the importance of education, but honestly, like my sophomore year, I actually came into college as an undecided major because I love sports growing up. I played high school football for all 4 years. I'm really passionate about football and sports in general. And so I came into college. I knew I was too dumb to do anything in the science and math fields. And I didn't really know what other options besides like, once I grew up in like high school, then I didn't know what else to do. So once I found out what I could do and other options for that, I kind of like realized through a lot of mentorship with people in the industry that, while for me, school is something that like, I did the normal stuff, like take 5 classes per semester and everything like that. But you have to like really get out there and really try to like interject yourself into the professional world. So I actually got my job at ESPN at the end of my sophomore year of college. And so I was still like 20 years old, and I was just doing part-time stuff there at the radio station. And then yeah, so I was started doing that. And then a year later, while I was just finishing up my junior year of college, that's when I got the job at the Dallas Morning News. So I guess like in summary, like for me, it's been a very interesting journey because like you grow up, especially in like in the South Asian background and things like that. You hear a lot about just like first of all, like my career options as a 15-year-old were limited to like doctor, engineer, and I kind of took a risk, I guess, or whatever, like to go beyond that. And once I did, like I think it really helped me open my eyes to a lot of different things that are out there. It's just like it's not career paths aren't just so narrow that you have to do something super cookie cutter. And so like for me, like I was working all throughout college while also doing my education at the same time. But I think like if like someone that's a doctor or something like that will probably say like you have to like buckle down and really focus on the education part of things. And so yeah, I think every field has like its unique paths, and that's kind of what mine's been so far.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. It definitely is very relatable, especially within like the Desi household context, and I guess just kind of like expectations of what your family and even culture kind of has from you from the start. Sara, what do you think? Like, what are some of your experiences and kind of what made you decide to go into the thing that you're going into right now, which is social work?
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, everybody. So my background is in social work, but definitely pretty similar to Saad. It did not really start off that way. So I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with like a double bachelor's in biology and Islamic studies, which is so random. But I initially went thinking I was going to go into the medical field, had like all these dreams of like glory or whatever. And then, life kind of hit me like, in this very realistic way, like maybe this is not something that's meant for you. And I felt like a lot of things were happening at the same time that Allah was just like showing me that like, this is like, you're kind of meant in this to be in this other direction. And I couldn't really figure out what that was. But I knew that I'd always had this passion for mental health and for domestic violence. And those issues, like I think the community has gotten way better about talking about them like today. But at the time that I was there, I don't think that was even a conversation. And I really was really interested in starting those conversations. And so somehow along the way, I kind of found out what social work was. I had never even heard of it before. I really wanted to go into counseling. And I really felt like that was my passion, and it still is. But along the way, I ended up getting into a lot of really interesting you know, like nonprofits and work that I'm doing. So currently, I do counseling like once a week. And I also work for FACE, which stands for Facing Abuse in Community Environments, where we investigate allegations of abuse against religious and community leaders who have abused their positions of power, specifically physical, sexual, spiritual, and financial abuse. And with the goal of notifying the community of this misconduct that's been substantiated, to, you know, request and hope that our masajid and our institutions will make better hiring and firing decisions. And again, never really thought I'd end up there, didn't even know what that was, but have found that like it's very rewarding and fulfilling work, also very traumatizing. Yeah, it makes you view the whole community very, very differently, and it's important to stay grounded. But I really enjoy where I've ended up because it's very fulfilling. It's not really, you know, I don't think anyone really ends up where they think where they will, and some people do, and that's great. But that period of exploration, and for that to continue even throughout while you're, you know, in your career and trying to figure out what you're going to do with it is very fruitful. And yeah, you learn so much about yourself and your potential. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Noor, if you'd like to go ahead and share a little bit about your educational background, some of your experiences, where you're at today.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for having me on. I would have to say that just like Sara and Saad, I definitely took a roundabout way to where I am now as an attorney. I think it's crazy to expect 17, 18-year-olds entering college to know what they want to do for the rest of their lives. So of course, at the time, I didn't think it was. I thought that's what I had to do. And so I was pretty stressed thinking, okay, I need to just make this decision. What am I good at right now? Okay, high school senior, I'm good at math and science. I'm just going to do something with that. So I started off at UTD as a biomedical engineer, which, you know, was very exciting for my parents because it's like doctor engineer together. And I slowly started realizing that, like, although, you know, I was doing pretty well in classes, it just wasn't where my passion was. I like the problem solving aspects of it, but I felt like I could apply those same problem solving skills in a different avenue, a lot more fulfilling way. And so I started kind of exploring different options. I tried a different type of engineering, thinking maybe, oh, UTD's biomed program is just a little bit new. Maybe that's why I'm not enjoying it so much. I was like the inaugural class for the undergrad. They had a master's program for quite some time, but the undergrad was new back in 2011. So I did electrical engineering, still wasn't really there for me. I was just, you know, I felt like I was getting through classes just to get through them, but I wasn't, you know, looking forward to like what kind of career I would have with those skills. And then I took a semester class called the Innocence Project of Texas, where we would sit and review different applications from various incarcerated people throughout Texas, saying, you know, applying to say that they were wrongfully incarcerated and that they're actually innocent of the crime that they were convicted of. And they would submit their applications to the Innocence Project of Texas, and they would come through, because they get so many applications, they would need more eyes to kind of do the initial scan through. So that's where the students came in. We would go through the different applications, we would read through trial transcripts, we would look through all the evidence that was put forward against these people, and we would put together a mini presentation to the attorneys to say, you know, we think this person might have a good case for exoneration, which is the legal term for reversing a conviction. And, you know, if so, this is how we think you should go about it. If not, you know, we think it would be better to like not use the limited resources on this case. And so that kind of stuff, I just realized that was like that kind of advocacy, that direct advocacy that I felt like was really going to impact a person's life on an individual level was where my passion was. And so it was sophomore year at UTD when I made the switch to interdisciplinary studies, which is basically, I just need to get out of here and graduate so I can go to law school. And yeah, so then I went straight through after that. I went to UT for law, and I've been working as a government investigations defense attorney, so defense against any type of government investigation that our clients are facing since then.
Cool. Awesome. Jazakallah khairan for sharing. Zaineb, what about you? What kind of educational background do you have, and what steps have led you to where you are today?
Yeah, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for having me on today. So for me, I was a little bit like Noor. I was very like math, science oriented, kind of childhood nerd. And I was actually fortunate to grow up in a household where my parents were like, don't make a decision too early, go explore. And of course, I was a kid that was like, I'm pre-med, I want to be a doctor. And that didn't happen. So I pursued that through college. I was pre-med through college. I worked at the hospital. I did research. But in the meantime, I did find biomedical engineering because I liked the application of basically all the sciences that I was learning on my way to med school. I just liked the application part of that. And what was really drawing me was at the time, all the innovation that was coming out with all the different implants, heart implants, bone implants, genetic engineering was a big buzzword back then. So that kind of led me to biomedical engineering. And what I didn't realize was I would absolutely fall in love with engineering. I love that problem solving. I love the critical thinking aspect of it. And I was still really stubborn. I was like, I wanted to be a doctor since I was 2. So stayed on that route, but decided, you know what, I'm going to go get my master's first. So I went and got my master's in mechanical engineering because my focus was in biomechanics, which really deals with like human movement, the structure of the human body. Just absolutely continued loving it, but still, wanted to explore medicine. So I did that for another year. And being in that program, I think I realized I was like, this is not for me. I'd spent 4 years at that point, doing a lot of engineering. I was, just constantly problem solving and hands-on, and I didn't feel that way when I was in medicine. So I took a step back and reevaluated, and I said, maybe I should try to do something in engineering. And I did, and I'm very, very thankful, alhamdulillah, that worked out really well for me. So I started in a startup company with a friend of mine from college and they were doing, they were developing a medical device for basically detecting traumatic brain injury early. So also, brought in some of that medical background I had, but as well as the engineering. And then I moved from there into a healthcare IT world. And so what I haven't mentioned so far is software engineering, and that's because I have no experience in that. But I had this medical experience that I brought. And, I think the best advice I got was like, you'll figure it out. And I did that for about 5 years and I did figure it out. But in the meantime, I was working a lot with customers and customer needs and having to translate that to my technical team, or vice versa, taking, the tech team's work and being able to explain that to the customer. And that really led me to a path of systems engineering, which is what I do now at Collins Aerospace. Most of my work now is in human factors engineering, so I've kind of come full circle, kind of back into the biomedical world, but not in the medical device that I expected. Now it's, in aerospace systems, and I absolutely love it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, and Saad, Hasan, do you want to come on and tell us a little bit more about your educational background? For those of you guys who may not know who he is, spoiler, he's a dentist. And tell us a little bit about the steps that kind of led you to where you are today.
Assalamu alaikum, guys. Thank you so much for having me, Amira. I actually wanted to thank you and all the hard work that you put in to kind of create this this process and kind of just like the process of ALUM. And I think that's a really great initiative. I think I was resonating a lot with you when you said that young professionals don't really have a place to go once they graduate, right? Because we're not uncles, we're not like aunties yet, but yet we're still kind of like in this space, and it's like I don't know what I'm doing, So you kind of feel isolated. So I did want to give you props and a shout out for having that, and may Allah SWT reward you and put Baraka in this initiative. So everybody say Ameen. My name is Saad. I went to UT Dallas for undergrad, whoosh. I had a lot of pride in my undergrad, Noor. It's a really good school, kind of. I really wanted to go to UT Austin, but I didn't end up going because my parents really wanted me to stay close to home and stuff, and it just became like a family decision. So I did it for the parents. Then I graduated undergrad in 2016, and then I went to NYU, New York University in Manhattan, for dental school, which is okay. And much like Noor, Sara, Zaineb, and Saad, who've both spoken so far, I think that we all kind of have our parts where we kind of think about what we're doing, and we're kind of reflecting on it. I unfortunately was not very good at math and science. I do not like math and science, but I was able to be good enough to get to the point that I did. But I think the reason why I chose a healthcare profession was because I really like patient interaction and I love talking to someone on a daily basis. And I think a lot of people that I've talked to that are working from home during the pandemic are having a hard time. Initially, it was great. Everyone was like, "Oh my God, I love working from home." But I think I like seeing people and working with people. And I think you get to do that very intimately as a dentist. So you're literally in their mouths, you're looking inside of them, and it's just opening a window to their soul. So it's kind of an interesting experience. I will say that if I'm being 100% honest, I hated dental school with every fiber of my being. And I think that the medical and dental school process is just so unnecessarily torturous, unfortunately. But I think the product is a little bit better than the process. So anybody who's ever pursuing a profession like this, like we hear a lot about how you wanted to go into medicine or to dentistry or these things. It's not really worth it unless you're ready to give 1,000% to it, because there's just so many nights where you have people crying and sleeping. I slept in the library crying, right? And it's just like the process of this. So I do give props to people like Sara and Zaineb, even Saad, to like following their passions and what they kind of sought, what the community needed, and that's where they kind of followed their professions. And I think that as a community, when we're moving forward, we need to start evaluating our life goals that way, instead of being like, this is a profession and this is what you need to establish. With that said, I am a dentist, and I think that my passion towards dentistry kind of following that was in the public health sphere. I don't think a lot of people realize that there is so much access to dental care that people don't have. Medicine can be a lot more easily accessed because of hospitals and the way that systems have been made, with things like Kaiser Permanente, and like Baylor Scott and White. Like Baylor has a whole system of hospitals. The thing about dentistry, since it's privatized, there are a lot of people that are marginalized from those experiences. So in undergrad, I actually started an organization called Volunteers Around the World, where we went to the Dominican Republic and Peru to provide free dental care on the countryside for patients that have never seen dentists before. And then in another experience in undergrad and as well in dental school, I actually went to Morocco to work in the mountains in villages where people had no opportunity to ever see a dentist. And the purpose actually of that was not just to bring dental care, but it's also to provide education of just like oral hygiene. Because I think one time we did an oral hygiene workshop in a village, and 2 minutes later, this guy was brushing the goat's teeth, right? He actually brought a goat and he actually started brushing the goat's teeth. And I was like, that's great. He got the brushing part down, but he's using it on a goat now. So a lot of people don't have toothbrushes. They don't have these experiences. And the other thing that people may not realize, and I'm sorry if this is a tangent, is that a lot of those areas, especially abroad, even if you come from a village yourself, and you go to the city to study, you're probably not going to return back to your village and to provide care. So another goal of my own was in starting these organizations, were to actually convince those dentists that they're practicing locally now in those city areas to go back to their villages and they're back to their hometowns to actually provide dental care. And by doing that, what you're doing is that you're going to inspire a child one day to go into that profession and then come back and you'll have a reciprocal process in providing the community. So that's what public health is. It's education, it's inspiration, and it's motivation for the local dentists, because local dentists are going to go back to their village unless an American dentist is coming to tell them to do that. So it is kind of a difficult process, but what you're doing is you're providing access to healthcare and you're providing dental security and oral health care. So that's kind of what my motivation was in pursuing that. Right now, I work at a pediatric practice. So I see, I think about 60% kids and then their parents usually. So I love working with kids. I think dentistry on children is a little bit different because you get bit a lot because your hands are in their mouth. But it's fun, it's exciting, and I like it the most because I feel like I'm making a very positive impact on people's oral hygiene and the way that they're going to grow up. Unfortunately, we do have kids that come in who need an X amount of crowns or full facial reconstruction, you know, like where every single tooth in their mouth is decayed. But those are the children that usually end up growing up taking really good care of their teeth because they understand what they need to do moving forward, right? And I think that's what's very important and making an impact. So I think based on what everybody's been saying, even though I went through this more traditional route of becoming a dentist, going to that medical field, I think it's very important to follow your passion and follow what you're seeking out and doing that. And I think that, to be honest, dentistry isn't something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I do, but I am passionate about helping people. So I feel like dentistry is a vehicle for that. And just kind of ending on an idea, what I wrote in my personal statement to NYU was the reason why I chose dentistry is because I love spit. And spit is really gross. People don't really like it, and you'd be weird if you like spit, right? But spit works really hard in your mouth because it buffers acidity. It takes out the bacteria in your mouth so that you can keep your teeth nice, white, and clean. So I want to work as hard as spit to keep people healthy and smiling, and that's my goal. And it's not because of spit, right, or because of necessarily just the dentistry, but it's about creating smiles and creating happiness.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Saad. I definitely resonate with you when it comes to public health. I don't know about the spit part, but definitely with public health and just being able to serve your community. Asad, what about you? What can you tell us a little bit more about, or a little bit about your educational background? You know, what kind of steps led you to the career that you're currently in?
Yeah. Hey, assalamu alaikum, guys. Yeah, so I am probably the only person that's on this panel group that didn't graduate from college. I went to college going in for a business degree. I was kind of undecided like Saad was. And as I was going through it, I got into real estate, not as a realtor in the beginning, just kind of learning about investing, doing construction, you know, the background of it, you know, the nitty gritty part of it, where you have to kind of break things down, break things up. And one thing that I feel like I've always been good at is making a connection with someone that I'm talking to. Just making a genuine connection with someone I'm talking to. And so while I was in college, I was working at Apple and I was doing, business to business sales, managing over, 30 to 40 people while I was doing that. And as I was working there, I had a mentor that was there that had a real estate investment background. And what he did, he's like, what are you doing going to school? If you are so good at connecting with people, why don't you just go ahead and drop out and go towards real estate and start going after it? I said, okay, let me take a try at it first before I just completely drop out of school. So just don't drop out of school if things aren't working out for you. Don't just drop out. Make sure you have a plan before you go do it. So my biggest thing was I wanted to come up with a correct plan before I wanted to go do that, and I wanted to go look into some investment properties. When I was in Huntsville, I went to San Francisco State University. Most people know that as the town that has 3 jails right next to each other. So anyways, I started getting into real estate as in just investing, looking at properties that I want to buy, fix up, and then sell or rent out to people. And that was really interesting to me. It was a way for me to have money coming in and being able to have equity going in the future, right? At the end of the day, the reason we're all working is to have a future in the end, right? So I was working on that when I was 20 years old, 21 years old in college. And once things got really stable for me, I decided to step down and step out of college and pursue real estate full time. I first started off at Rogers Healy, which is in Dallas, Texas. They're a luxury-based real estate company. After that, I came over to Real Sense Real Estate, which is a Muslim-ran real estate company, which is really cool. And one thing that I kind of focus on is I focus on bringing Muslim families that are out of state into Texas, since everyone is trying to move to Texas now, right? I'm trying to basically bring Muslim families and make their process really, really easy. Find them a massages that they're close to, Valley Ranch, INT, Frisco Masjid, all these massages, subhanAllah, like we're blessed with the massages that we have, whether they're big or whether they're small, it doesn't matter. So yeah, my biggest emphasis right now is just bringing Muslim families into Texas in the Dallas DFW area and getting them a house close to the masajid and helping Muslim families that are in Dallas that are maybe not close to the masajid, get them close to the masajid also. So yeah.
Awesome. No, that sounds amazing, and definitely there's been a large number of folks coming into Texas, just, because how can you miss out on Texas as a Muslim, right? But that's really awesome. And I think a common kind of theme that all of our panelists kind of shared is this idea of just, you don't necessarily know exactly what's going on, but you're kind of allowing yourself to open up to opportunities that are being presented, right? So you don't know exactly how something will work out, or an opportunity is presented to you that you may not have ever been familiar with or ever kind of envisioned being a part of. But SubhanAllah, Allah is the best of planners and kind of just plans everything for us. We just kind of have to go along with it. So thank you all for sharing your experiences and being able to share all of those things. So I guess an interesting question would be is, tell us a little bit or walk us through kind of a day in your life, right? MashaAllah, you guys are, you all have so many different things going on, and you work in different spaces with different people. Walk us through what that looks like, whether you're, doing things virtually right now, or you're doing things remotely at home, or if you're actually going in person and having to do these sort of things. What does a day in the life of a realtor or an attorney or a social worker, what does that look like? And Asad, since you're on, I'll just go ahead and pass that question on to you first.
Yeah, so my day is different every day. I don't have the same, and that's what I love about my career, right? I don't have the same day every day. I don't have to get up, do something, and then go do something else and go do something else. And I plan my own day. So, for example, usually I'm up after 5 o'clock. I'm usually up, and either I'm reading an article that's real estate related. A lot of things that are real estate is based on interest rates, mortgages, what's going on in the stock market. So making sure I'm kind of staying in tune with that. And then sometimes I wake up at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. If I want to stay in and sleep in all day, I can. So I kind of have that comfortability to do that. If I have clients, I make sure that I have my clients, planned out in a way of we're making sure we're going down the correct route. If there are clients that are out of town that are coming from, for example, I had a client that we just put next to Valley Ranch Masjid, and they were coming from Pennsylvania. And obviously they can't go look at the houses. So I would have to go and plan out those days and go to those houses, FaceTime them, show them around, make sure, we look at the water is working right, the stoves are turning on correctly. And we're doing that for them in front of them, right? So for me, a day is kind of what I want it to be and how productive I want to be. Most of the times, since I'm on my own free time, I want to make sure I'm grinding most of the time. So whether it's educating myself what's going on in the market, or helping a client get ready for a buy, so doing a consultation, or taking clients out and showing them homes.
Awesome. Yeah, it seems like that, I feel like that requires such a high level of discipline, right? When no one is telling you what to do, or you don't really have to report to someone, it has to be your discipline and your passion really driving you to want to get up every single day and, just kind of do it on your own and at your own pace. What about you, Saad? Both Saad and Yousuf, since our two Saads on. Can you tell us a little bit or walk us through a day in your life?
Yeah, it's also very different on a day-to-day basis, and then a lot of it depends on what the teams that I'm covering are doing and things like that. So it's sometimes when the teams are at home, I'm at every game. So like it was really busy when I was a general assignment writer because I was at 41 Mavs home games, 41 Stars home games, all the Cowboys home games. So it's just a lot of like driving, I guess, from home to the arenas and things like that. And then also just practices and everything. But it's I'll say like sports journalism is, if you do it right, it's a very 24/7 type of job, but also like it's always on my mind, but I'm not always working. It's a weird balance. But it's like it's a lot of fun, and it's like a lot of times, like for me, like most of the stuff that I'm doing now, it doesn't ever really just get like I don't want to ever like take it for granted or anything like that, but at the same time it's like it's also very weird because like the personal interaction, like I'm a very introverted person, and so people often find that kind of funny because of the job that I do, which is a lot of talking on the radio and talking and interviewing a lot of people. But it's also something that's very like, it's very different because most of my interactions like throughout the day are usually with like celebrity type people, and it's not very like normal interactions. It's very like pointed. A lot of times I'm just talking about sports, most of the day. So, which alhamdulillah is great. I mean, that's kind of why I got into it. But at the same time, it's a very different. I guess I didn't really realize the differences in those two worlds that there are. Like a lot of times you just don't. Sometimes you just want to have like a normal conversation with someone, and you've gone all day talking to like 15 people, and they're all just a bunch of interviews, and so it's kind of weird. But yeah, I mean, but a lot of my days, it's just um, I'm watching a lot of sports, watching a lot of hockey, basketball, football, writing about it, breaking it down, things like that. And then on a day-to-day basis, it's also like as I've grown in it, one challenge that I've kind of I still haven't really gotten down is also just knowing how to knowing how to kind of operate in a public spotlight type thing. Just because like on like most of my work is done through Twitter and things like that, and it's a very toxic app, very toxic environment on social media, and I really do hate it, but at the same time I kind of have to do it for my job. And so adjusting to that public spotlight has also been something that's like on a day-to-day basis is very difficult, because like you can be having like a bad day or something like that, and you just have to front completely differently, like it's a very public job. And so it's been interesting. And I think one thing, a little bit on a tangent, but like one thing that like my day-to-day life has taught me is just the emphasis and importance on mental health. And so taking care of yourself and moving away from those things as necessary. I also have a little sister who's some of you guys may be aware of on the panel, Javeria. She's in the mental health field and things like that. So that's really helped on a day-to-day kind of thing, just working with her. So it's a lot of being in the public eye on a day-to-day basis. And I got into my field because I just love sports and I wanted to be in sports all the time. Ideally, I would like to just like fly under the radar and just do my thing, but that's just not the nature of my job. So yeah, it's just balancing all that.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for sharing. Noor, what about you? Can you tell us a little bit about what a day in the life of an attorney is like?
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, like without anyone on this panel, it's going to depend on what the caseload is looking like, what you have in front of you. But depending on where my cases are at in their phase, in the life cycle of a case, basically will kind of change what I'm doing in the day-to-day. So early stages of the case, my day is going to be full of hopping on meetings with clients and getting details from them about like what they think the merits of their case are versus what the government might think they have done, or what they're being accused of doing, or what their employee is being accused of doing. If we're moving into like heavier phases of the case, we're going to be looking through their documents and their emails and making sure that we've produced everything that's relevant to the case. And so that's other associates and I refer to as the dreaded doc review. But it's a very important part of the case where you're going through literally hundreds and hundreds of emails just to like search for different terms that either the opposing side or the government will ask you to search for, depending on who's on the other side of the case. And let me backtrack and say that I'm specializing in government investigations, defense against government investigations, but especially under COVID, those I feel like have slowed down. The government really has shifted its focus to kind of more public health, obviously, and are less are looking less into like corporate, just different violations. And so I think it's phasing back into being a heavy investigation season, but at least throughout COVID and especially in the beginning of it, a lot of the cases have slowed down. And so what we do at the firm that I work at is kind of like shift our attention to other cases, different areas of law. So we do some like products liability, employer disputes, things like that. And so in those cases, we obviously won't be going up against the government. It'll be a typical civil case. But Yeah, I think a lot of it actually surprisingly transitioned pretty seamlessly into the virtual world. We spend a lot of time on our emails. We're learning stuff and teaching other people what we learned, basically. So I'm learning the law on, I don't know, products labeling, and then summarizing it in a way that I can explain to the judge why, my client's products were labeled correctly. So that's that aspect of it. Then we're also doing like virtual depositions, which are now being done through Zoom, which is really interesting. Usually, I don't know if y'all ever seen those YouTube videos of people reading out deposition transcripts. It's basically like a recorded interview, but a very accusatory directed interview by the other side of a witness. And the most ridiculous stuff ends up on YouTube of like people asking really ridiculous questions, or the witnesses being like, I don't know what you mean by that, when it's like very obvious. Y'all should look at the Little Wayne deposition. It's the famous one, so if you Google it on YouTube, you'll find it. But that's basically what we end up doing, but virtually. And so a lot of that has pretty much, easily shifted. Hearings are now telephonic or by video for the judges that have been able to figure out video. The only thing that I feel like hasn't shifted as well has been trial. But sorry, I'll throw out there that we're always on the clock, even though it's Saturday. I actually have my computer open and I'm going to be jumping back on. Not to scare you all away from it, but definitely, especially with everything being virtual, people kind of expect you to be around at all times. So yeah, so I spend a lot of time just kind of making sure that I'm up to speed on my cases, so that if the partners are asking me about something, I can kind of walk them through where we're at. And I've gotten to the phase, I guess, I'm in almost a mid-level, I would say, associate at my firm, and so I'm getting a lot more leeway and like to kind of take my cases and run with them. And so my role at this point has been just to kind of keep my supervisors and partners apprised of what I'm doing on the cases, so that they know that things are being handled. But yeah, that's the quick and dirty of it.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, with everything, I mean, we're kind of like a year into the pandemic, so kind of think by now, like, we get accustomed to a schedule or a ritual for doing things remotely and virtually, but it's kind of like, every day, even if you're at home, every day is just a different day. Like, you don't know if people are going to show up at a meeting on time. Are we just going to push it? Like, are we having 9 p.m. meetings? Like, it's definitely a lot to kind of juggle with. What about you, Saad, Hasan, the dentist? What is a day in your life kind of like?
So my life is a little bit different, I guess, from everybody else's, because I don't have a job that unfortunately can be virtual. So it is very different in that regard, where it's just everything is kind of just in its own way. So it hasn't really changed because of the pandemic, except for the fact that we're wearing a lot more like PPE when we're working. I'm very fortunate to have been vaccinated already, so I'm a little less cautious than I was previously. I think when the pandemic first started, we were wearing like 4 or 5 layers of things, and it was just really hard to breathe. But that's kind of what it was. But I think my life starts off. I actually am kind of fortunate because my practice starts at 11 a.m. So I get a really kind of late start of the day. But since we are a pediatric practice, most of our patients come in the afternoon, right after school. So we're pretty busy from like 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. because of the type of patients that we see. So a lot of my day is I get in, we usually start off our day with like harder procedures, right? In the morning. So in the morning we may do a root canal or adult fillings or something like that, or I'll do my patient crowns for an adult in the morning because they're take more time and they're a little bit more intensive. And then with kids, it takes less time to do a procedure, but to do the actual procedure, but it's more of time sitting with them and showing them the instruments. So most of the kids that come in, I have them hold the mirror and be like, oh, look at your mirror, look how beautiful your teeth are. And I have them like we always give them a toy for every time we see them. So I have them hold on to the toy and play with it a little bit. And I walk them through the procedure. I'm like, oh, we have some sugar bugs in your teeth. So we're going to have to take out the sugar bugs. And this is what we're going to need to do with that process. And we're going to paint your teeth and we're going to brush them and make them look nice. And it's really important to kind of talk to them that way about it, because they kind of see as everything as traumatic. So what you're doing is you're trying to make it easy on them and a kind of like a fun experience. So that's just the process of being a pediatric dentist. I think on my side, it's a little bit different because I graduated dental school last year, and because of COVID, our licensing process was significantly delayed. So I actually didn't get my dental license until October to practice here in Texas. So that's when I actually started working in early November. So I've only been practicing professionally for about 4 or 5 months now. And I will say that dentistry is a massive learning curve. Everything you're learning about from dental school to actually practicing is very different. I remember on my first day, I was asked, like, doctor, we need your opinion on this partial denture. And I was like, man, we should really ask a doctor, right? And I was like, oh, that's me. I'm the doctor. I'm the one that's supposed to give my opinion on the denture, right? And then I realized, I think things moved really quickly because I knew that I was going to be the sole provider and the sole authority, as opposed to a dental school where you see 2 patients a day, and now I'm seeing 15 to 20 patients a day. So I'm learning to work much faster. I am pretty tired most of the time because a lot of people don't understand that dentistry is very physically laborious. And I will say that on a weekly basis, I do get a chiropractic massage because I think it's very important to keep your back steady and keep your back healthy. I think I learned that from some of the athletes like LeBron, Russell Wilson. They invest a lot in their body, and you can see that they're working really hard in their careers as a result of that. So I think on a daily basis, I'm able to start off the day pretty easy, and I think towards the end of the day, we're pretty gassed because I think it takes a lot of physical effort to be in the dental field. And I think in addition to that, I think the other thing that I do really like about my profession on a daily basis, I am able to educate people about their oral health and better ways of doing that. So I think on a daily basis, I think in my day, I'm kind of fortunate to be sitting down and talking to patients about their oral health and then diagnosing and writing them treatment plans that's personalized to them.
Awesome. And what about you, Sara? Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background, history? Tell us or walk us through a day in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of similar to a lot of others who've spoken already, my day looks pretty different, just depending on the week, depending on the month. I feel like my journey has been really strange because I've been in nonprofit consistently, and the journey of the nonprofit itself has been strange, like as I happen to be there. And so when I was at my previous nonprofit, like it had just kind of been on the come up, and then it was like going down under. So it was, and it had nothing to do with me, but it was like I felt like I was trying to figure out and save it, and like put all my social work skills together and figure out how I can fix this. And I realized like I couldn't. So when I was there, I was doing counseling every day. Like I would, some weeks I would have like 15 clients a week, some weeks I would have like 30. And then other weeks I had like consistent programs that I did with the masjid because it was a Muslim nonprofit. And so I was having to go to different masajid and sometimes universities and speak on mental health and talk about foster parenting or domestic violence or whatever it was that I was supposed to talk about at the time. So that was a really interesting experience because I didn't really feel like I'd end up doing that, but it just made my weeks and months really fluctuate. And now I don't do so much of that anymore. I do counseling once a week. And so once a week, I'll have like 5 or 6 clients that I sit down with. And then with my other job with FACE, again, it fluctuates. And the interesting thing about FACE is like we have only 2 paid staff members right now. And so we're juggling the work of like 10 people, trying to manage this nonprofit that the community is seeing an ever increasing like need for. And, we get multiple reports a month of allegations of abuse. But we're so limited on our resources and capacity that some days I'm spending my time trying to trying to play investigator, even though I am not an investigator by profession. And other days I'm really in my social work role where I'm doing the intakes or I'm referring them out to mental health services. And other days we're creating knowledge tools like content and toolbox, like what's it called, toolkits, FAQs, like how should communities respond whenever allegations of abuse come about, and maybe there's a FACE report, maybe there's not. You know, educating and teaching our community like on how to create that culture change and shift, and you know, hold their own leaders accountable, because two people here in, you know, one in Dallas, one in California, can't exactly account for the entire American and Canadian Muslim community. So yeah, some days it'll be like me working on my own. Some days, like yesterday, I'll have like 6 straight hours of interviews with different people, maybe filming a victim impact statement, which has been kind of a new thing that we've been doing. Over the summer, I took on the role of like a documentarian that was working with us, and I spent the whole summer like documenting what FACE was doing, which was super weird, but also really cool, because I was working with like all this high-end fancy equipment that I'd never touched before in my life. And so yeah, really every day looks different, and I think that's also what I like about it. And the interesting thing about FACE as well is like, it's really hard to describe it and put it in one bucket. So when I explain to people what I do, it's like I can give like the overview, but like what my day looks like is just, there's so many different hats I have to wear. It's kind of like investigative journalism, but the difference, like when people think like, oh, so like private investigator, it's like, no, because when I think of a private investigator, it's like they know all the things that have happened or have been done, and they're trying to find the person. And with us, it's like we know the person, and we're trying to go backwards and figure out what has been done and what has happened. And how do we relay that in a way that's not traumatizing to the community, but also warns them of how they need to be aware of this particular person and not have them in so-and-so position, or bring them to a conference or whatever. Anyway, anywhere like where you put them in a place where they can use their position of power to take advantage of congregants, students, etc. And yeah, and then like we do a lot of self-care, and so some days like we'll just have to, you know, relax and take off. And we're very into like, you know, make sure you have a therapist, like, you know, make sure you're you know, spending time with your family, make sure you we all have like nice staff retreats that like we spend time talking with each other during. And so it's a lot of different things every single day, and I really enjoy it that way, because it's a really good balance between the really traumatizing days and then the days that we have a really good time, and just remember to ground ourselves in why we do what we do. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And Zainab, what about you? What does a day in your life look like?
So I think I'll start with what my day doesn't look like. So with engineering, there's a stereotype that we sit there and we are writing formulas all day, or like I have a calculator in my purse. None of that is true. You know, my day, like you guys, changes day to day. There's a little more consistency, I think, in engineering with, you know, we have, at least for what I do, kind of technical programs that I'm running with, but some programs are much shorter. In aerospace, some of them are long. I work on programs that are, you know, for 3 years or 15 years. So I'm, you know, may not even be around to see the completion of that program. But it keeps it really exciting. And for me, you know, human factors is considered a specialty engineering. So I get to do very different parts of human factors. So I'll get pulled on into one part of the design phase, you know, provide my input, provide my expertise there, you know, write requirements, and then I may come off that program for a little bit, and then I'll cycle back in when they need me to verify designs or any of that. So I like being able to work with a lot of different kinds of engineers. Also being in the role that I'm in systems, we also interface with customers. So I've, you know, to me, I'm an extrovert, which also really doesn't fit the stereotype of engineers. So having to learn how to interface with, you know, like the 90% engineers that are introverted, and make sure we're communicating well, and, you know, no one's stepping on toes, or, you know, no one's basically just being able to work together and communicate. And I think that's what I learned. Communication really is this important tool in engineering. Even though it's a soft skill, it's so essential to what we do. And it's even more so now that we're working virtually. So, you know, having those meetings, you know, or just being able to ping somebody or give somebody a call and make sure we're on the right page. We're discussing what we need to in a timely fashion. I think something a couple of people have kind of touched on, and it's been really important to me from the beginning of my career, is work-life balance. Because at my old job, I really didn't have a lot of work-life balance, and I'd randomly get calls on weekends, or be expected to jump online at midnight, and that's midnight's not really a time when I'm technically available. I'm half asleep, and so when I came into my new role at Collins, I really put work-life balance as one of my like, this is what I'm going to do. And I think it surprised a lot of people because at the time, I was single, no kids. Everyone's like, what else do you have going on? But when I have my own life and I'm able to put interest, whether it's into the community or building my hobbies, it really does make me a better engineer on a day-to-day basis. So with the pandemic, I've really set my own hours. I've actually kind of become a morning person. I start at 7:30 because I like having my afternoons to do whatever I want that's not work related. But I think, some maybe career advice would be, find out what's important to you when you're in your career, and it may change, that it's sometimes cyclical, it changes as your life changes, but don't be afraid to fight for those things. I think I've learned the more vocal that I'm being, and the more I'm advocating for myself, more people are more likely to support me, versus if I'm not speaking up about it, nobody else knows it's important to me and no one else is going to support that.
Awesome. No, thank you so much for sharing. And I mean, it's really great for you to brought up, being able to advocate for yourself, because I feel like I'm personally a young professional right now. I'm only 6 months into my first full-time job. And I feel like sometimes like there's something like I want to be able to speak up, but I'm just like, can I say this? Like, am I going to get fired if I like say I can't do this job? Like, what's going to happen? So being able to advocate for yourself and really stand up for yourself, especially kind of early on as a young professional, I think is really, really great advice, and definitely something I'm going to keep in mind kind of moving forward. So right now we do have a couple of questions that people have kind of sent in, and there's in no order. So, for any of the panelists, just feel free to kind of share as you'd like. So I guess, something that one of y'all mentioned is that, when you're like 17, 18 years old, you don't really know what you want to do. Like, you're in high school. The only thing on your mind is like, what am I going to like eat for breakfast, right? So I guess what kind of advice or, what would you say to someone who has a lot of, different passion, a lot of different interests, and they, they're currently in undergrad and they don't really know exactly what they want to do. They love a lot of things, but, undergrad is coming to an end, you're about to graduate. What or how would they be able to kind of go about navigating that? What kind of advice do you have for someone who has a lot of interest and a lot of different passions, but doesn't exactly know what that next step looks like?
I'd actually like to, or I don't know if anyone else is saying it, but I actually would love to answer that question. I think that the best thing to understand is to never rush anything, right? It's important to really take your time to do this. I think a lot of times that's like Adams and Daisies, right? We think that this is your goal. You got to do this because you got to get married, like that's like really important. So you got to get this job, you got to get the thing that you want to do so that you can get to that next stage. And I think because of that, we tend to rush ourselves into things that we're not actually comfortable with. And I'll be honest, like I think that I rushed myself into dentistry, even though I knew I wanted to do dentistry ever since like middle school, right? I think I rushed myself into dental school because I was like, oh, like this is what I'm going to do. I know I want to do dentistry. Why don't I do this? And then I realized like dental school is so intense that I'm literally going to be married to this for 4 years, and my whole life I can't do anything else but this. So I realized that I rushed myself into that, and that caused me a lot of difficulty in life because I'd be in dental school, and it's difficult to go to school, the school in New York City, because it's weird because our library was on the second floor of this one building, and it was all glass, so you can see everything that everybody else is doing. So I was there on like Friday, Saturday nights, and everybody would be like driving by and having fun. You'll see all this, and you're literally sitting there studying. I think that's how they made our library on purpose, so you can see the nightlife, but you know that you're studying. So I think that happened. That was just kind of annoying about that. So I think I really say that even if you know what you want to do, take some time to like relax and to enjoy life, smell the flowers, right? Because how are you supposed to do that once you kind of get into it? Right? Because then life is going to move forward and fast and you're never going to be able to catch up. It's about figuring out what you like and what you want. And even if you know what you like and you know what you want, try to figure out the things that may not be related to your profession are those things you want to do. Like I actually really wanted to do like an Islamic studies program at ALUM or Bawany at the time, but I don't know. I was like, no, like I had to focus on school right now, and that's kind of my top priority. But then I realized that now that I'm in my profession, it's kind of harder to drop out now and move forward, because now that I'm in my profession, I'm gonna always be asked, oh, why did you stop practicing dentistry for a year? Was there a case against you or something like that? You know, like that type of thing. Then I had to hit my girl Noor and be like, yo, like people calling me for malpractice, right? But it's just that I think my most important answer is there are so many steps to life. Your profession isn't your top priority, right? You are the top priority based on what everybody else was saying about work-life balance and those type of things. And I think it's really hard to notice that when you're an undergrad, because you're studying and you're going from A to B, so study to job, right? But that's not necessarily how life works, right? You got to study, take a break to enjoy the thing, because the purpose of getting a job is to figure out how you want to live your life. And if you're not living your life, then what's the point of getting the job? Right? So it has everything to do with the steps in the process that you take to enjoy your life. So if you're in this kind of situation, you're like, why? I don't know what I'm doing, or I know what I like, but these are the things that I also like that are not related to my profession. Take some time to put that in perspective, because your job isn't your life, right? It's only a small aspect of it, and work-life balance is the best thing. And if your job is going to take up your life anyway, then that's not really a life, right? There's so many things to our life that are so much more important. And I think it's really also important to realize from our Prophet ﷺ, and he himself, he wasn't just like a prophet, right? He had other things in his life that he also did. And he in times to enjoy, and he even had time to hold little girls' hands or talk to somebody about their parrot. And I think it's really important to kind of realize those opportunities before you actually jump into the thing that you like or you want to do.
Yeah, I think just to echo on that, and also just really what Zaineb said as well, like 100% echo both what Saad said and Zaineb said, because like the work-life balance is and you have to, and sometimes you have to like, depending on what your career becomes or whatever, like you have to put more of an effort into work-life balance than other situations. Like for me, like growing up, sports was like my most favorite thing. That was entertainment, but then it became my job full time. And so now it's like, you know, creating that work-life balance, like a lot of that for me is like watching The Office or, you know, things like that now, just something that's like separate from something that's different from like what I'm doing, even though sports is what I love. But a lot of what Zainab and Saad said covered it. But like one quote that's like always resonated with me that I just wanted to like point out was, I think it was Albert Schweitzer or something, someone, I think it was him. He said something like, success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. And so I think that's really important to realize that, you know, we all have, first of all, there's a different definition for success for every single person. And for some people, like, I never diminish, like for some people it is to get married by 21, 22, start a family. And there's nothing wrong with that. And for some people it's, you know, their careers or whatever. And it's just like, I don't know, like maybe just like, you know, define what success means to you, and then try to, and then don't use that as like, you know, that's what you need to do. Like you have to be happy in order to be successful.
Yeah, I would, adding on to what both Saad said, I think when you know, whatever your profession becomes, you have the ability to move around once you're in that role. So I think a lot of times the way society presents work is that you're going to start this job as soon as you graduate, and then you're going to do it until you retire. And that's terrifying because nobody wants to live in that monotony. So, you know, just because you start a job or you take a risk, maybe you don't know if you want to do that job for, you know, whatever amount of time, but try it. If you don't love it, go find something else, and that's okay. I will say, as like the trend that we see with like millennials and Gen Z especially is like 3 weeks into a role, you're like, oh my God, I still haven't figured it out. I'm not making a difference. I gotta go. And that's not how life works. It takes about a year to get comfortable in a job. I remember the first time as a human factors engineer, the first time I felt comfortable speaking up and being like, I don't think that's right, was 11 months into my role. And then I said it, and I went home that day and I had ice cream to celebrate because I was like, I got this. And it's a good feeling, but it took me, you know, several years to get to human factors engineering that I'm passionate about. I tried, you know, I was in sports medicine for a while. I was in healthcare IT for a while. I was in medical device for a while. All of those experiences have added to who I am today as an engineer, as a professional, as a person. But those were not good fits for me. And what I'm doing right now is a good fit for me, but my interest may evolve in the next few years. And then, you know, my career path may change. So be okay with trying different things and exploring, and know that you're not stuck in your role.
Yeah, and I just wanted to echo what you just said as well, that like I was thinking something similarly too, that like our interests and our capacity change as we get older. Like I'm constantly thinking about, like in college, I was like, oh yeah, it's fine that I don't sleep. I have the ability to do all of these things. I can go to medical school and do X, Y, and Z thing. And like now I'm 26, I'm like, I need that 8 hours. I'm like, I'm so thankful I didn't go to medical school. And like, you don't really know like your body and how you'll end up and how you'll, like, you know, how you'll age, which is like a really weird thing to think about right now. But like as we age, our capacity changes, our passions change, our interests change. And some of those things, like you have the ability to explore if you have created that work-life balance and actually have the time to explore those things. And even I wanted to also say, like within, like if you're in that point, like in college where like you're not really sure what to do next, it's like, I know one thing like I would tell myself from back then is, you know, like just trust the process and kind of be open to things just kind of falling across your path. And pray istikhara before you apply to, you know, these programs. Like really like talk to Allah and ask about, you know, your path, because it absolutely can change as you get older and as you maybe decide it wasn't that for you, but maybe in that particular time period in your life, like this is what you were meant to do. And maybe that was a stepping stone to what you're meant to do later. And so it's like kind of like what Zaineb was saying, like nothing has to be set in stone. Like just because you ended up with that specific degree doesn't mean you have to live with that for the rest of your life. And even within those degrees and whatever experience you gain, there is so much room to move around and just explore a variety of career options. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in to say that even at our level, after having established our career, well, I wouldn't say established, but I think we're probably still in the young professional portion of our career, but you know, having established ourselves at least past professional school and jumped into an actual career, it's still not set in stone for you. Like if you go through law school, for example, or med school or whatever it is, and start working and say, this is not what I thought it was going to be, like it's really not too late. And I think a lot of the stress that I felt as an 18-year-old trying to decide my career is because I thought once I say this is it, then it's it for me. Like I'm never going to be able to change it. But if I wake up one day in 5 years and say, I don't want to be an attorney anymore, I'm going to go on to like what's going to make me happiest. Right now, that's not the case, because I do still like find, you know, a lot of passion in the advocacy work that I do. But if for any reason, you know, humans, we change, and our interests change, our families start to grow, whatever it may be, could change our circumstances. And so I think it's just really important to like not overly stress at any point in your life and say, you know, this decision that I make will be forever. Like nothing is forever. So.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you all so much for sharing. I think those are very important and wise words that I feel like I probably wish I had heard a couple of years ago, because, you know, as a student, and I think even after you graduate, or even like as a young professional, as a youth, like there's a lot of uncertainty, and that weighs heavy on a lot of people. And then the pressures of like society and family and culture, it's just like one on top of the other. And, you know, we don't want to mess up, but I think a common theme that all of you all had kind of mentioned is it's okay to mess up, right? Like you're young, it's part of like life is literally about figuring it out and like messing up along the way, and then just, you know, continuing going. So thank you all so much for sharing those really wise words. I think a question, and this is a more specific question now that we had from one of our attendees. So this is for the women on our panel. What kind of, I think, like more unique experiences have you felt or have you had as a woman within your professional field, your industry that you've, you know, you've faced? So if you feel comfortable sharing, of course, you know, have you dealt with any issues regarding wage gap or even discrimination? The three of you all are visibly, you know, covered Muslim women. It's very easily identifiable. Have you had any of those kind of experiences? And if you feel comfortable sharing, you know, how did you kind of navigate that discussion or, you know, that experience?
I don't mind starting. So engineering is clearly a male-dominated field still. And that's something that became very obvious to me when I joined industry. I think in college, I didn't realize it. Biomedical engineering is one of those fields that's about 50-50. So our classes, it wasn't obvious. But when I got into industry, I was like, where are all the women? So early in my career, especially, I was often the only female on my team. And there are skills that women bring to the table, even in the technical world. And it shows, again, communication, organization, those things are often things, not exclusively, but they are often brought by women on the team. But sometimes women also get marginalized into being the note taker or, you know, sit down, let the men talk. So those, you know, those were experiences. I think having a strong network of women, I'm part of Society of Women Engineers. It's, you know, I think for me, when I didn't have other women engineers to talk to at work, that was a group of women that I really could leverage and say, hey, I'm dealing with this at work. How do I deal with this? And having that group kind of advise me, mentor, sponsor. You know, there's often times where I had some of those women give me advice and then end that advice with, you know, you really need to look for another job. You belong in a better situation. And they gave me the confidence to go look and to try those different things. Another thing I think, and this is probably true across the board, but wage gap, you mentioned that, Amira, that's still a thing. But I think it's something that women can get a little bit more assertive about. There are resources about learning how to negotiate. There are, you know, different sites that do post salaries for when you're looking at a certain industry or a certain company. Don't be afraid to go out there and, you know, do your research and ask for it, because I think this is the best advice I ever got in my career, is always ask. The worst thing that'll happen is they'll say no. And when you're negotiating, especially, you put a number on the table and it's scary. Like, I have gotten, alhamdulillah, to a point in my career where I'm comfortable negotiating, but I don't like doing it. It's never like fun. But you put a number on the table and they're not going to rescind your job offer. Like, they're not going to be like, oh, you're just going to cost us too much. They may come back with another number. And sometimes if it's lower than what you want, you can go back and negotiate with, you know, vacation time, you know, dependent care if you have children, flexibility to work from home once the pandemic's over, or, you know, if you have children, you may need to come in a little later after dropping them off or picking them up from school, you know, leave a little earlier. So those are all things that you can bring to the table. And I think, again, don't be afraid to go do those things. But at the end of the day, alhamdulillah, I think, you know, maybe even studying Sira, you learn how strong Muslim women were at the very beginning. And those are examples that you can apply to your life today. So just because we're Muslim doesn't mean we have to be quiet and docile and, you know, sit in a corner. We have the ability from all of these, mashallah, these amazing women who were so strong and helped, you know, even spread our religion, learn from them and know they're strong Muslim women and that you are one of them.
So in the legal setting, it's similarly male dominated, but specifically white male dominated. And so on top of being the only woman in some spaces, I'll also, you know, be the only person of color or the only Muslim, visibly Muslim person. And while that does carry, you know, the same type of struggles that women are facing in workforces everywhere, I think I would say the most challenging thing that I've had to deal with is the legal profession's emphasis on alcohol in every freaking setting, like literally anything you can imagine, from like receptions to getting clients to just hanging out with your coworkers. Like a lot of it just revolves around alcohol, and being someone who doesn't drink and then also, you know, makes it known that I don't want to be in spaces where people are drinking. it's not easy. You're definitely going to have to just be okay with people not just like respectfully understanding, I guess, but not really understanding, just agreeing to, you let you do your thing and they do theirs. Of course, there are always so many alternatives to these types of things. Like if you want to meet a client, you can always just go for lunch, and people aren't really going to drink at lunch. You could always do so many different types of like coffee meetups. There's so many other ways that you can network and socialize and be a successful professional without, liquid courage. But it's not really heard of. And especially because in the legal field, where I think our career is number one for alcoholism, and just generally people trying to escape an overburdensome workload with alcohol. I mean, and it's not even always just that in that context. Like our firm does fundraisers where one of the things we do is sell alcohol, and all the junior associates are expected to do that because you're a junior, you're helping the firm. And that's something that I had to put my foot down on and say, unfortunately, as much as I would love to like support this specific cause that we're fundraising for, I can't sell alcohol. I can't be part of that. Let's find another way that I can, contribute to this fundraiser. And of course, people are very respectful if you are confident in what you're saying and you're not asking for permission, you're just explaining what your situation is. But it is just something that you're going to have to realize that, no one's going to be there to like pave that path for you. You're going to have to be, that Muslim woman that's just explaining it to people and being the first in that situation. And so I think that's been the most unexpected challenge in my career in terms of being the only Muslim woman in my spaces.
Yeah, I don't think I can speak much to being the only Muslim or being the only woman, because I work in nonprofit and I've so far only worked at Muslim nonprofits. So I feel like I've had a sheltered experience, which in some ways I'm thankful for, but that's also come with its own set of challenges. Like one of the nonprofits I worked for, it was like all the staff were women and then all the board were men. And without going into too much detail, it did not end very well. And it ended up with like everybody just resigning, and there was a lot of workplace abuse and misconduct that was happening. And so that was definitely something I did not expect for like my very first job with like, little staff of like 5 people and everyone being a person of color. But it's just like sometimes there are factors like beyond your control. And I think on that note, like I just want to even add, like it's really important to know when to get out of these jobs. It isn't like I worked, I think I'd applied to 100 jobs before I got to that one. And so it felt like I really forced myself to stay for a long time, despite things going bad very quickly. But then I learned like it's just not really worth it. It's not worth it to be in a position or a job where you don't want to be there. You're driving really far to get there, and then as soon as you're there, you want to leave, or you're spoken to in a way that's not like, that's completely demeaning to who you are and the work that you put in. And so I definitely think it was a gender-based kind of verbal abuse that like I'd seen like around, and not really so much experience, but more so was witness to. And there were a number of ways that, people dealt with that and that I dealt with that. I kind of just blasted them and left. And I don't know if I'd always recommend that. That's like if you're ready to throw everything away and just do that, like great, good for you. But it doesn't always end up working out that way. And in some ways you just really have to protect yourself, and leaving would be better than staying in a situation like that. Like if you're as a woman being talked to that way and, spoken to that way and made uncomfortable because of who you are. So yeah, it was a very strange experience.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you for sharing all of those experiences. Yeah, I mean, definitely, as a Muslim, as it is, right, it's already difficult enough. And for those of us who have relatively like foreign names, it's already kind of like, being in a largely or predominantly like non-Muslim space, kind of navigating that as like the only Muslim or like the one of like 2 people of color like in the building, it can be a little bit difficult. And especially for Muslim women who are, physically like veiled and they wear the hijab or something along those lines. There's like an added amount of pressure, right, in terms of like representation or even figuring out how to navigate different things. So thank you all so much for sharing those insights, and inshallah, hopefully it's nothing that folks would have to go through, but the words that you provided were really definitely insightful and really great words of advice. We had another question come in from an anonymous attendee, and they said that they were wondering if you could talk a little bit about finding a job, especially during a pandemic, especially for those who are, upcoming or newly or recent grads. For those who are looking for a career, and also for those who are kind of, planning on going to grad school, how can we kind of navigate that, especially when, we don't know if things are really going to be back to being in person, with things being virtual. What are some things that we should look for, whether it's going to grad school or some professional school, or even, looking for a job as soon as you graduate?
I would say if you're thinking about grad school, do grad school because you want to do grad school. Like if you think it's going to help you in the future. I think one of the big things that has really come out of the pandemic right now is how much student debt is crippling to American society over time. So, some of us may be fortunate to have, parents or school support, but not everyone, has that financial support. So if you're going to do it, make sure it's something you actually want to do. Don't feel forced to do it. Even right now, even with the pandemic, people are hiring. It is harder to get your foot in the door, but do keep in mind, a lot of companies will pay for you to go to grad school down the line. So if it's important to your career or something you even want to do, you can get support through your companies eventually. I think one maybe closer term, something to think about is even with the pandemic, like I said, people are hiring, so leverage professional networks, whether you're involved in school, and if you're not, you don't have a strong network, use something like LinkedIn. Find people, if I try, anytime a Muslim person reaches out to me, I try to respond to them. What I will ask is, sometimes I don't know what the ask is. So if I get a blank request to connect, I don't know what that means. But the people who just take just take a minute and just, if it's a Muslim person, say salam. If it's not, greet them, let them know who you are. You don't always have to start with, hey, I need a job, because again, that's to somebody who's in that professional world, that can be a little exhausting as well. But introduce yourself, tell them a little bit about you, what you're, where you are in life, school, or if you're already a professional, what you're looking to do and how they might be able to help you. Because again, if I don't get a message, my assumption is someone's looking for a job. Sometimes they only need career advice, or they may need, they may want to do a 30-minute, Zoom session where I can kind of talk to them. So yeah, do your LinkedIn do your LinkedIn, connections or any of your other networking, but put the ask in there. I think you might reach out to 20 or 30 people, and you may only get, 2 or 3 responses, and that's okay. Because also realize there are people who are struggling through the pandemic themselves. But, get yourself out there, whether it's, through your virtual LinkedIn networks, leverage Facebook, leverage groups like the MSA alumni groups, reach out to your own university's alumni groups, ask that career center, how do I make connections with people? Like, put me in touch with people. Because I guarantee if somebody reaches out to me and I don't have a job like at my company, but I know somebody in my network who might, I'll put them in touch. So people are willing to help, because none of us got to where we are today by ourselves. Somebody helped us get there. It was by the grace of Allah that we're where we are. And I think a lot of us are looking to pass that on and, pay it forward. So inshallah, leverage those connections.
Awesome. And then I guess just before moving on to another question, I don't know if any of the other panelists wanted to chime in, but I mean, those are some very fire words. So if you don't have anything to say, it's all good. But if not, we did have, I guess, a final question, is just to kind of wrap things up. I mean, alhamdulillah, you all got to share a lot of your experiences. And again, with such a diverse, so many diverse, I guess, fields and industries that all of you all are coming from, and the experiences that you bring to the table, it's a lot, right? And inshallah, one of our goals is that we hope that the attendees here, you all found someone here within, one of our wonderful panelists, someone that you can resonate with. And you may not know them, you never have to talk to one of the panelists ever again, but it's someone that you can kind of look up to and be like, hey, like this is someone who kind of mirrors what's going on in my life. And if they are where they're at today, then maybe inshallah I can do that too. And so I guess to kind of bring things to a close and to kind of wrap up and bring all the bits of pieces of advice and experiences that you all share, what word of advice, if you could, look at the 20 or 18, 19-year-old you, for the panelists, what word of advice would you give to the younger version of you who maybe didn't really know what was going on or just was kind of as clueless as most of us were when we were 19 or 20 years old?
I can go first. I think I would tell my 18, 19, 20-year-old self, like, I would really emphasize how much grades don't matter. And I know that's not always the case for every profession. I know, like, if you go into graduate school or you're going to medical school, like, yeah, it does. But maybe I'm just gonna give a personal example. Like, I graduated as valedictorian of my high school class and I thought I was the greatest. I was like, oh yeah, Noor as well. There's 2 valedictorians here at least. And I don't know if you had a similar experience, Noor, but I thought I was great. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to college, I'm gonna get 100 on everything, it's fine. And I failed classes in college. I almost didn't graduate on time because I think I failed cell biology in my very last semester. And that was it was 2 different people. I was like, how does, it was this very weird cognitive dissonance. But it's I'm here and I'm fine and I didn't die and I have a career and I graduated and it's okay. And I think again, this society is so hyper focused on numbers and money and grades. And it's just, you realize once you're done with it, how detrimental it is to just be so hyper focused on that. And you're only focusing on these numbers, but not really so much on quality or on, your passion or what you're learning. And it's in putting the emphasis on grades or money or whatever, we lose out on the true, the true essence of whatever it is that we're learning or whatever it is that we're trying to do. And I wish I'd had enough bandwidth to focus on those things and to really dive deep and maybe figure out early on what I was meant to do and what I was not meant to do. I had to really go through 2 years of biology and realize I failed a class at the end and be this maybe isn't for me. But because I was just so focused on getting the numbers and getting the grades, I really didn't get that opportunity. And now, however many years later, I don't remember a single thing I learned in biology. I wish I'd never taken it. I don't know why I have the piece of paper, it feels fake. And it's it's one of those things, it's not really a regret, it's more so just a learning experience. But definitely I would go back and tell myself, it's not something to worry about because it's really the bigger picture once you're in your career that matters. So yeah.
I'd say going off of what Sara said and the last kind of piece of advice I think I gave was, don't be afraid to ask. The worst they'll say is no. I think the flip side of that is, if somebody presents you with an opportunity that you haven't thought about, or someone tells you, hey, you might be good at, don't be afraid to say yes either. When I was 18, I said, I mentioned I was pre-med, I was on, this route to being pediatric surgeon. And that's clearly not where I am today. But I love what I do today. And I meet, have professional contacts. And if they ever find out that I wanted to be a doctor, they're like, you really? You were made to be an engineer. And it's because somebody put that idea in my head. And then someone was like, okay, if you're not gonna do medicine, go try engineering. And then, go move around in your career. And someone always, alhamdulillah, put that seed in my head, or someone was like, hey, why don't you try this? Or even, at work, sometimes you have a lot of sponsors who will come up to you and say, hey, we know you're not really on this project, but do you mind helping on this project? Don't be afraid to say yes, but advocate for yourself. Don't let people push you into something you don't want to do. But if it's just, even a little bit of curiosity, go try it. If you don't love it, you can always go do something else. But you don't know your career, it may be the best thing that you ever did for your career. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask, and then don't be afraid to say yes when someone brings an opportunity to you.
I'll just say briefly what I said earlier. To my 20-year-old self, I would say, don't worry so much because nothing is gonna be nothing's gonna be permanent. Sorry, what you choose for yourself now is in flux. You're never gonna know exactly what's going to happen next. So, you know, say Bismillah, tie your camel, as the saying goes, the hadith goes. But yeah, just have to look on Allah SWT, because He's going to lay out the best plan for you.
Awesome. And then Saad, if you have any advice or, you know, something that you wish you would have told the 20-year-old version of you about where you are today.
I can't tell if you're talking which side you're talking to, but I think the advice that I give myself is to take life slow, because I think the really cool part about being in New York City is I met so many people in so many different types of professions, right? And I had like friends who were in so many different. I think it was really cool because New York and LA are two places in the country that are also very entertainment based. So I actually met a lot of people who were actors. I got to meet Hasan several times and hang out with him and hang out with him and his friends too, which was really cool. And I was like, wow, I should have done comedy instead of doing dentistry, right? Like this is like really cool, right? So that was really awesome. Even though I mean, ultimately, I'm pretty content with my choice. I think there's so many options to choose from life, not to be overwhelmed, but to keep your mind open to all of those things, because life can kind of go by very quickly, and there's no end goal, right? It's not like I need to buy this house or do this thing, because eventually those things will happen, right? If you set your mind to something, it'll happen eventually. But the thing that we miss out on are the things that kind of would make us happy. And I think that's just something that's very, very important. I think the other advice that does sound kind of different is I wanted to focus kind of a little bit on mental health, because I think sometimes we push ourselves into professions because of a stigma, right? And I will wholeheartedly admit that a very big reason for me to choose dentistry and to become a doctor was because there's a status of being a doctor, and my parents really wanted me to do that because it's kind of the pride of their family. And I think that takes a massive toll on your mental health, because I think many times in dental school I was like, I just want to drop out. I don't want to do this anymore. It's not worth it. Even though I like ultimately kind of was able to push through it, I think don't make a choice that's going to also hurt your mental health, because it's just something that is so unheard of in our community sometimes, that we don't even use that as a reason to choose a profession, right? If the profession itself is going to weigh very heavy in the way that you can think and even sleep, right, then it may not be the best choice for you. And I think that's why you need to really consider in your whole life, right? Like Sara was saying, she needs like 8 hours of sleep. Like, yeah, you need 8 hours of sleep. You should get 8 hours of sleep, because if that's what you need to function, then you need a profession that does that. I think in dental school, I think on average it was like 5 hours of sleep a night, and that was just something that like I was just generally doing, right? So I think that we need to look at the kind of like the bigger picture here, and within the bigger picture, you need to realize that there's a mental health aspect. And I think my second thing is like, because I know Noor said about istikhara, but I'd also say get a mentor, right? If you're looking at a field, and I think this is what the whole point of the ALUM project is, and these talks are, so that we can find mentorship. Talk to somebody that is actually in the profession and who can give it to you straight, right? Like Noor was talking about how alcohol-based the law profession is. So is medicine and dentistry. Everything is alcohol-based, right? Like we would have these holiday parties, and the medicine cups that we give medicine into patients, that was used as like shot cups, right? It's a really common thing, because people want to drown out their problems in law and medicine and dentistry. They do indulge in these things, and as someone who doesn't drink alcohol, right, it's just very strange to me that that's the way that things are dealt with, right? So finding a mentor who does kind of share the same values as you and is in that profession, they can kind of guide you a little bit better on what that picture will also kind of look like.
Awesome. Jazakallah khairan, y'all. That was some really, really, really great advice. And I'm not 20 years old anymore, but I'm still going to take all that advice, because I think those are really, really great reminders for all of us, you know, whether we decide on pursuing another degree or another field, or, you know, grad school, professional school, whatever that looks like. Those are really great reminders. And I think that, you know, we'd all be able to utilize that in some way, shape, or form. So alhamdulillah, we were able to spend about an hour and a half together hearing from our wonderful panelists about their experiences and, kind of talking a little bit about what brought them to where they are today. Inshallah, we're hoping to have more of these kind of events and different workshops in the future. So please, stay connected with LSC in whatever way or shape possible. We do have a little post, workshop survey for the attendees. So I did just drop a link in the chat box. So for the attendees, if you all could just take a couple of minutes, just feel free to answer whatever you'd like. We will be closing the form on Monday. So if you can just, spend like 2 minutes just going through, sharing your honest opinions and feedback about how this event went, that would be really, really awesome and really helpful for us. Like I said in the very beginning, Project Alum is, inshallah, a community and initiative that is created by, MSA alumni and for MSA alumni in order to help MSA students or even undergrad, young professionals in that aspect. So really this community is based for us, and we'd want to be able to support our community and our young professionals as much as possible. And the only way to really do that is to know how we can best serve you all. So if you all could just take a couple of minutes for the attendees, feel free to bring up that survey whenever you'd like. Inshallah, we'll also be sending out an email. If you did RSVP beforehand, we'll be sending up a follow-up email later on this evening or early tomorrow morning. We'll have some information regarding the winners of our gift card giveaway for those who attended. So just keep an eye out for that. And of course, if you ever have any questions, feel free to contact LSC. We're on all social medias at MSA LSC, and we'll also drop our board email in the chat. So if you have any other questions, suggestions, anything like that, feel free to hit us up. LSC is really here to support MSAs and young professionals in whatever way possible. So whatever we can do to assist you guys in that process, definitely let us know. With that being said, we had initially scheduled a breakout session, but because we are a little bit short on time, I don't want to hold anyone here if they need to go. But if any of the attendees want to stay on, if you have any other questions that you wanted to ask specifically or directly to the panelists, you're welcome to stay. But if not, we're going to go ahead and stop the recording right now, just in case anyone wants any off tangent discussions. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining, and inshallah, we hope to see you guys soon.